Aloha, my name is Devin. I am a senior at KA Charter, and I have been with the Huliau Foundation Leadership Council for 1 year. Today we're going to talk about the carbon footprint. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about fossil fuels and their role in the carbon footprint. So, fossil fuels come in many forms. Coal, oil, and natural gases are all fossil fuels, and one form that we interact with on a daily basis is gasoline. Like the name entails, they are formed from fossils. The process of making fossil fuels takes thousands of years. The ingredients needed to form fossil fuels is a carbon-rich environment, which is basically any location with a large condensation of living things. Over time, layers of earth form over the original layer. Heat forms from the natural pressures of earth at a few more thousand years, and this heated and pressurized slurry of decomposing minerals becomes compacted into different forms of fossil fuels like the ones mentioned earlier. These dead things, mostly plant matter or marine life that have come from millions of years ago, are extracted, processed, and then become food for your car. And what's interesting is that if you look in these areas where there's currently a lot of oil, like in the Middle East, you can see that the number of extinction events that occurred in that area millions of years ago directly correlates to how much fossil fuels in the area present day. Now that we looked into fossil fuels and how they are formed, we can start talking about the carbon footprint and the role that fossil fuels play. Carbon is a building block of life, making up a whopping 18% of the human body. There's a molecule formed by carbon called carbon dioxide, or CO2, which can be seen in the image right here. CO2 is naturally found as a gas floating around our atmosphere. It's also considered a byproduct of a lot of natural cycles of life, like respiration or decomposition. Now, CO2 is naturally occurring and is part of a family of gases called greenhouse gases, which trap heat in our atmosphere. This is known as the greenhouse effect, and it makes the Earth warm enough for life to survive. However, too much CO2 and other greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere increase this effect and are causing the planet to warm. Thankfully, there are natural carbon sinks that absorb CO2, like ocean phytoplankton, and trees using it in photosynthesis. But with a lot of these everyday things we participate in producing so much carbon dioxide that it's too much for plants alone to deal with. So a carbon footprint is the measured amount of carbon dioxide released as a result of a person's everyday activities. Basically, if a lot of your daily activities include a large release of CO2, like driving your car, then you will have a higher footprint. The goal is to ultimately have the human race's carbon footprint as small as physically possible, which we are pretty far from. But the US is specifically one of the farthest countries from that goal. To tell you more about that is Matea.
Hi, my name is Matea Prestige. I'm a senior attending online high school at Laurel Springs, and today I'm going to be talking about carbon footprint analysis. Now that we know what a carbon footprint is, let's see how carbon footprints for different countries and lifestyles compare. Let's take a look at a carbon footprint analysis. The countries with the largest carbon footprints can be easily guessed. They include Japan, the Russian Federation, India, the United States, and China. One of the reasons the carbon footprints of these countries is so high is due to their use of fossil fuels for energy. What is interesting, however, is when we analyze a country's carbon footprints per capita. Most of the countries with high emission rates per capita are the countries with lower populations that are the world's major oil producers, such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kazakhstan. However, the more populated countries with some of the highest per capita emissions are Canada, the United States, and Australia. These countries have an average of about 16 metric tons per person, about triple the global average. These numbers are not the end, however. Because so many products are produced in China and other Asian countries, much of our carbon footprint is emitted in these other countries. It makes sense that countries with higher standards of living would have higher carbon emissions. However, there are several countries throughout Europe that maintain high standards of living without such high carbon emissions per person. Portugal, France, and the UK all have an average of about 5.5 metric tons of carbon per person. A lot of this is due to the fact that these countries utilize more renewable and nuclear energy sources. Additionally, public transportation is much more accessible, and there are dense urban centers with emphasis on bike accessibility. Minimalist living is also much more common in Europe, and there's typically less value in consumption. The choice of energy source plays a key role in battling climate change. By reducing the use of coal, China's biggest supplier of energy, and other fossil fuels on a global scale, we could dramatically reduce the amount of carbon being released into the atmosphere and make a dramatic difference in global carbon emissions.
Aloha, my name is Kyrie Sisavong, and I'm a junior from HP Baldwin High School. And today I'll be talking to you about the impacts of climate change. As Devin had previously mentioned, your daily actions influence your carbon footprint and the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases which are released into the atmosphere, which are causing the average temperature of Earth to rise. And over the past 170 years, human activities have raised the atmospheric concentrations of CO2 by 47% above pre-industrial levels found in 1850. And all of these carbon emissions contribute to an enhanced greenhouse effect, which is causing the Earth to warm and the climate to change. As you can see here, 2019 was among the most top 3 warmest years on record. And that leads us into climate change. So, what exactly is climate change? Climate change is the increased change in regional climate patterns due to the increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. These are 10 indicators of a warming world. For example, the warming of Earth is causing ice caps, glaciers to melt, and this is adding to the warming ocean, which is the leading cause of sea level rise. This warming is also causing weather patterns throughout the world to change, leading to extreme weather events such as the increase in heat waves, drought, forest fires, flooding, and an increase in the intensity of tropical storms. And these impacts can cause detrimental effects in the long run, destroying infrastructure, impacting the economy, and environmentally, island resources which cannot be replaced. In addition, climate change also has many impacts on the ocean, one of which is called ocean acidification. Ocean acidification is caused by excess CO2 being absorbed by the ocean, making the ocean more acidic, which is impacting coral and other marine organisms that build calcium carbonate shells. Both ocean acidification and global warming are additionally leading to an increase in coral bleaching events, threatening marine ecosystems around the world. If we do not mitigate the effects of climate change, beautiful places such as Hawaii will suffer. But there are many different solutions to mitigate global warming and to build resiliency to the impacts of climate change.
Hello, I am Jas Patel, a junior at Kamehameha Schools Maui, and I will be talking about some solutions to shrink your carbon footprint, what Hawaii, the United States, and other countries are doing to shrink their carbon footprint, and going over the Paris Climate Agreement. There are many ways that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save energy. The first step is to calculate your carbon footprint. Here are some ways to help shrink that footprint. One way is to compost food waste. You can also not support fast fashion. The fashion industry produces over 10% of all carbon emissions. Plastic bags are made from petroleum, and producing these single-use bags releases greenhouse gases. But using reusable bags helps with both plastic pollution and climate change. One major way of helping is by implementing home energy efficiency, using energy-efficient appliances, using LED lights, wash clothes in cold water, hanging clothes instead of using a dryer, and using a timer on your hot water heater don't just save money, but also help the environment. It creates less demand for energy, in turn, lowering our dependence on fossil fuels. You can also drive less. Transportation is the major source of CO2 emissions in the US. Walking, taking public transportation, carpooling, ride-sharing, or biking helps reduce CO2 emissions. You can also buy food locally, as transporting foods requires more fossil fuels rather than goods grown locally. What is currently being done? While Hawaii is currently one of the most fossil fuel dependent states, it also has the most ambitious renewable energy plan, with a goal of carbon neutrality by 2045 to be achieved through renewable energy, energy efficiency, and ecosystem restoration. Other places like Iceland, Norway, and Kenya, along with many other countries, are moving towards renewable energy. Renewable energy is derived from natural resources such as wind, waves, or sunlight that are neither finite nor exhaustible. Many countries have taken steps to restore the forest to their natural glory. Countries such as Pakistan have taken the downside of the pandemic of people losing jobs to having those unemployed to help lead the effort of planting trees. Some other countries have taken to using carbon taxes, which tax fossil fuel users for the climate damage that is being produced by the fuel uses. What is the Paris Climate Agreement? The Paris Climate Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. Its goal is to limit global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In 2020, the US officially withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement, along with Syria and Nicaragua. However, the new Biden administration has committed to rejoining the climate agreement in order to help address climate change.